Welcome along to this special London Call-In show. We're looking back on the calendar year of 2014 here at Loftus Road. It proved ultimately to be a very memorable 12 months for QPR. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Brian Melzack on the right,
Good evening.
QPR fan supremo, as well as good evening.
Summertime.
As well as Aidan McGee from Sky Sports News, and on my left, Ian Taylor, head of press at QPR, and also Phil Parry from BBC London, responsible for that commentary at the playoff final in May. Firstly then, Brian, over to you. As a whole, 2014 was a pretty eventful one for the club.
A typical Queen's Park Rangers year, with the ups and the downs, and hopefully ending with an up, in a nutshell.
And Aidan, as a QPR fan first and foremost, it must have been very memorable for you. We'll talk about the playoff final later on, but as a year, it's been pretty eventful.
Yeah, absolutely. Just up and downs all the time. But the key thing for me is that it's been really, really exciting. I think sometimes you accept that your team isn't going to necessarily be where you want it to be in the league table, but I think you want to be entertained. That's what the sport is all about. I think QPR, whatever's happened, you know, highs and lows all the way through, I think they haven't disappointed from that point of view.
Yeah, and Phil, you've covered QPR for more years than you care to admit, probably. It probably ranks as one of the highlights.
I think having been at Cardiff 10 years ago and sort of how, I suppose, painful that was for so many, being at Wembley in May was fairly eventful, wasn't it? But I think there's been so much to talk about, good, bad, controversial, non-controversial, that it certainly makes for an interesting year, yeah.
And Ian, you've been with the club 9 years now in a professional capacity, and I would say that the last 12 months have had all the emotions you could imagine.
Yeah, getting slightly greyer, as are you.
No problem, that's a good thing.
But no, it's been, I guess, memorable, eventful. There's so many words you could probably use, but I think the one thing is, you know, seeing 40,000 people come together at Wembley on that day and looking back behind you and seeing the other end empty was probably my memory of the year. It was just an incredible culmination of what was a tough season. Again, an eventful season. There were, like Aidan says, plenty of highs and lows, but that's the QPR way. And
Aidan, the year actually didn't start too well for QPR. Well, we went into it on the back of a poor run of form. If you remember, we'd lost to Leicester at home, we'd lost to Nottingham Forest, then we drew 0-0 at Vicarage Road in a game to forget, really. It was an absolute non-event just before the turn of the year. And then that first game back here against Doncaster, we won 2-1. It was a 90th minute winner from Charlie Austin. So we actually stumbled into the new year. Yeah,
we did. I mean, you know, the wheels began to fall off, really, didn't they, around about probably November, December time. I think the turning point for me was probably Millwall in October. That was a game where we looked a little bit complacent, and that was the turning point. But bringing us into Christmas, yeah, some ropey results around then. Doncaster, yeah, sometimes you think a last-minute goal can really turn things from you, but then you go out of the FA Cup. I thought the Ipswich performance was good. The away game, I thought there were some good goals there. We showed that we had the class to stay at the top of the division, but the big disappointment in the month was probably Burnley, really. I think that we had a real chance, having lost there, up there 2-0 2 months earlier, to really reverse things and put some pressure on the top two, and we missed the opportunity, really. 3-3. We shouldn't really be conceding 3 goals at home, not with the defensive record we had.
I remember
that last season.
That Ipswich game was, I mean, the first half we were fairly poor, albeit we had chances. In the second half, it almost seemed to be galvanised after the break, and Armand scored that good goal and gone through. It was kicked into gear, wasn't it, by Nico's fantastic individual goal. And then suddenly we had a little bit of momentum, didn't we? I think, looking at this, we beat Huddersfield, then we beat Bolton without really playing that well. And obviously Charlie, I think it was against Bolton, was it? Charlie got the injury.
Yes, it was. Yeah, we were a bit concerned with that as well.
You could have heard a pin drop that night, couldn't you, when he was getting
I think we were very concerned.
Yeah, I mean, the silence around, you say the pin drop.
There was absolute silence. Yeah. Everyone was watching the physio. The physio's done that, and you just heard this 18,000.
Our season was over. You just felt the season.
But then he got up, scored, but then came off, and then
a couple of months.
I remember speaking to him in the tunnel. I said, "You all right?" And he said, "Yeah, I think I'll be all right." And then got a call from the doctor the next day to say, "Get a press release ready. Charlie's going to be out for a number of weeks." So,
and the first game he missed, Phil, was the game against Burnley, his former club.
Yeah.
And we'd won 4 on the spin in January to get us back into the top 2. Burnley at home. Burnley were 3rd, and we knew if we won that, we would actually go 6 clear of them.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would pinpoint that game as the game where the automatic opportunity, we'd almost wasted it at that point, because suddenly we were level with Burnley. Burnley really kicked on, and we fell away. That was a crucial turning point.
Shows the value of goal scorers as well. I think Burnley had that, didn't they, last season?
Yeah, two of them.
Two of them. I mean, and in the Championship, I think it's critical. Momentum, I think you mentioned the word in, is important, but goal scorers and, losing Charlie, losing the sort of talismanic effect that he could have possibly had, Burnley get a bit of momentum. I mean, they took 4 points, didn't they, off QPR last season. So, I mean, that was critical. And it's the Championship, I think people forget how challenging it is. 46 games, Saturday, Tuesday, a lot of, there's a lot of pressure on the squad. And that's why you have your sort of ups and downs, and everyone has blips. Quite often, if you look at the table, I mean, people would have said that it's not an easy division. It's not an easy division to get out of. You lose a couple of key players, and it makes a big difference.
That Burnley game was the day after the window had shut, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and I remember Doyle scored, I think, our first goal, and Ma'iga got the equaliser. And even though we'd only drawn that game, you think opportunity missed. Well, on the plus side, the two guys that have come in that ultimately are probably going to fill Charlie's boots during that period he's out have scored. So you think, okay, it's not too bad. We picked up a point against one of our rivals. We move on. And then all of a sudden,
I was really concerned with the Derby game, actually.
That was
the away game.
That was the next game. Derby, under Steve McLaren, were inspired.
They were.
We lost 1-0.
And I just remember thinking, look at the average age of our starting 11 that night. It was not too far shy of 32. It doesn't sound very old to us.
But that's always been our concern for this last season.
Yeah, I know. And I just thought, in a 46-game season, you just need legs. And I was concerned at that point. But as I say, things didn't get better immediately. But as the season went on, things picked up.
Yeah, and talking about how difficult the league is, Brian, you only have to look at how Brighton are doing this season, how Wigan are doing this season.
For the expectations,
they were in the playoffs.
Yeah, the expectations from
and
Brighton,
now they're
especially
in
this
the relegation
season,
zone.
have just totally turned around, and similar sort of bunch of players, and you begin to wonder, is it the management, is it the players, is it the attitude of both?
The two teams that were beaten in the playoff semi-finals, both have struggled this year.
Yeah.
Brighton have lost the core of their team, but that's going to happen because a lot of those players were wanted. Bridcut, Ujoa, have ended up playing in the Premier League because they did very, very well. The situation at Wigan, there's been a change of management. We all know what's happened there. But losing the playoff semi-finals can actually... It can do. Because the other factor is that your season does get extended, and everyone talks about how the playoffs actually can have an effect on how you start the new season. Because you start later, your recruitment is different, your planning is slightly different, and it's had an effect on those two teams.
You see it.
So it shows how punishing it is, I think. And finishing top 6, although there was disappointment, I think, because of where the club had been, maybe earlier in the season, where the expectation has been. It's still a tough old place to get
But you've got the opposite, haven't you, though, with Derby County, who are still moving on from where they left off last season.
Yeah,
I think they feel injustice, don't they? They think they should have won that game.
Yeah, but they didn't. And that's all that matters.
I think everybody does, apart from QPR.
with an understanding, I think, because of what happened. But football's not one on what chances that didn't get taken.
Absolutely, but you look back to February, and that's really where, after the draw with Burnley, we lost to Derby, we lost to Reading, then we lost at Charlton on a.
I mean, that
was a really disappointing.
That Charlton game, I was in the away end that day because we'd done the walk, the Tiger thing.
Yeah,
and. I don't sit in the away end very often, obviously, because of work, but there was a real horrible feeling within that away end that day. There was fights breaking out between fans, and you don't expect to see that. You don't want to see that.
But then blame it on the condition of the pitch, but there again, Charlton were playing on the same pitch.
We were poor, weren't we? I mean, I think Ravel made his debut.
Yeah, missed the sitter.
But he did okay. But yeah, like you say, missed some big chances. And there seemed to be a nervousness about the players and the supporters that day.
How much was that though due to expectation, you think? Because at the start of the season, suddenly...
It was almost part of the problem that we started so well. Yeah. People thought it was going to be like it was in 2010-11.
Well, the expectations that we were entitled to...
But suddenly we hit that wobble, dropped into the playoffs, and then we started almost slipping down. You think, crikey, are we even going to finish in the playoffs?
I remember we were talking on London Calling many weeks going. We were just saying, will we make the playoffs? Are we going to end up in 7th or 8th place? And there were great concerns in February.
And even going into March, we beat Birmingham 2-0. Ravel Morrison scored an unbelievable free kick.
I thought that would be a turning point. You touch on that. Because Birmingham, I know they've struggled over the last couple of years, but St Andrews has never really been... It's similar to here, really. It's not an easy place to go to.
I can't remember QPR. That was the first time I remember QPR winning there in at least 30 years.
And we scored 2. We could have scored 5 or 6 that day. I remember Jermaine Jennis was excellent. Ravel obviously came up with a wonder goal. And I thought, right, that's it, a turning point, back on track. And then we lost at Brighton on the Tuesday. So it shows what I know.
Again, it was a really disappointing performance. So we were sort of stumbling in the second half of the season, the first half of 2014.
I was at that game at Brighton, and I just felt that it was quite similar to some of our away performances this season. We didn't really take the game to them, and we got stung. But bit similar to Swansea the other week, albeit against a side that was much lower down than us in the table. And you start thinking at that point, we're in the spring, we've probably got 10 games to go, and you're in big trouble now. But as I say, things picked up.
Is that where you had growing concerns about the average age of the squad as well? Because we started well, and then in the second half of the season we started to slip away, and I suppose you're worried about the fatigue.
Yeah, I was worried about the fatigue, but I think that night as well, Asuakoto was sent off for just an act of recklessness, really. And I'm thinking, well, you know, that's a seasoned, experienced professional who's played probably 150 games in the Premier League. That shouldn't really happen. What's wrong here? You know, I spoke to Phil Beard afterwards, and he didn't hide his concern afterwards either. And you know, that was one game where I thought, you know, if we can't win, we'd already lost at Charlton, we lost at home to Reading, we lost at Derby. Obviously, we just didn't seem to be able to go to teams in the top half and even compete, let alone get a result.
And Phil, probably the next two games almost summed up the opposite ends of the scale. Home to Yeovil, 1-3-0, looked comfortable, and then we go to Sheffield Wednesday, who were struggling.
Press to self-disrupt.
And then we were beaten 3-0.
That was the most disappointing.
Richard Dunn was sent off that day, but we were comfortably beaten. And you're thinking, I remember after that game, Richard Dunn said, we were talking about, can we still make automatic? And Richard Dunn's reaction was, I think we just need to make sure we get the playoffs. And that was as early, if you like, as March. It's still 2 months to go, and clearly that had got into the squad. We're falling away here.
Yeah, I mean, it was a disappointing night, the Sheffield Wednesday game. I think what was happening was that there was a lack of, as you say, lack of consistency. What it was, whether it was tiredness, whether it was pressure, but you know, win a game, think right, okay, push on now, and then not able to necessarily back that with a series of positive results, I suppose. But Wednesday were scrapping, weren't they? At that point, the sending off had a massive influence. Again, it was he's a seasoned pro, but I mean, you know, you make decisions like that. You've got to make decisions. The referees are going to make decisions, and it was I think difficult circumstances, but the lack of consistency. But again, I think that comes down to there are many factors, and I think the Championship can do that, and we even see it this year. You know, looking from afar now, you look at the number of teams. No one yet has taken the ball and run with it this season. You know, someone puts a couple of results together and then they get hauled back. And I think that's happened in the Championship. And I think maybe it's going to happen more this year. But I think there was, at that stage of the season, maybe because there were new players coming in as well, there'd been this sort of change around, you know, that it was a case. I think everyone then started saying, well, you know, finish in the top six, because it's, you know, you do get a chance. There's two chances of promotion, finishing top two, but you do get another opportunity. And then the playoffs are a completely different ball game. But it was at that point, pick up enough points, stay clear of seventh. People started looking at who's going to be finishing seventh.
You were forgetting about Leicester and
Burnley, because they looked strong at that point.
There was a moment in that Yeovil game, I don't know whether it was 0-0, and Rob Green kicked the ball out, and referee gave a decision which I still don't know why he gave. I think he was saying that the Yeovil attacker was obstructing Rob when he was kicking the ball out. Luke Aliens picked up the ball and just looped it into an empty net. And I know our results were a little bit indifferent then, but if we'd have lost to Yeovil, I honestly believe that we might not have made the playoffs.
Yeah, you wonder what impact.
We went on to win 3-0. I think Ravel scored again and made a big impact. And that was almost a turning point here. I know that we followed up with a poor result, but I honestly believe if we hadn't have beaten Yeovil, who were scrapping for their lives and didn't pick up many points away from home, but if we hadn't, it almost seemed to turn for me on that, and it was a remarkably strange decision.
But the away, just looking at the away form here, we talk about the away form this year. It's endemic of the whole calendar year, isn't it? I mean, lost at Derby, lost at Charlton, lost at Brighton, lost at Sheffield Wednesday, Bournemouth, lost at Bournemouth, Leicester,
and
Blackburn 2-0.
We're losing with respect to. You can argue this season, Man U away, Tottenham away, West Ham, Southampton, the form they're in. You can argue a case as to you don't expect to win those. But those teams you've mentioned, with respect, you expect to you don't expect to lose
And you
those.
look
No,
at
I disagree
2011.
because you're playing at a different level. You know, you're playing at championship level, and you're still going to be playing
But
those teams
our
away.
squad was significantly
But your attitude will be
stronger
different. Your
than
attitude-
those-
but your
those
attitude in
players
the
who
championship-
played.
compare out. I know we beat Yeovil away, so it's
Yes.
a poor example. But you compare our players to Yeovil's players, our wage bill to Yeovil's wage bill.
Yeah.
There's something not right when
Yeah.
QPR on the road. You guys would know more than I because you've reported on it for a number of years. But what was the stat this week? The Premier League.
Aidan, explain it to us. Let's get to the bottom of this.
What-
How do we sort out our away form? Aidan McGee.
Goodness me! I mean, look, I was impressed that we tried something different on Monday. We went 4-3-3. I thought the performance was probably about 15% better than it was against either Swansea or Newcastle. I went to West Ham as well earlier in the season. They didn't seem interested in attacking. One chance for Charlie Austin, I think, at the beginning of the second half. I went to Tottenham 4-0. Didn't really show up that day either. I mean, yeah, we're playing teams in the top half, but plenty of teams around us have taken the odd point. You don't expect to lose 8 in a row. I mean, one thing I cling to was probably 20 years ago, 94, 95, we finished 8th in the league. So the last time we finished top 10 in the Premier League, we didn't win an away game until December the 19th at Sheffield Wednesday. We went on to win 6 away games that season, and we finished in the top half. It kind of rescued us, really. So I don't know if that season we played anyone sort of, I remember playing Liverpool in the second half of the season, went to Old Trafford in the Cup. We had some tough trips. This time, I think, we're going to get some, I would say, more winnable fixtures. Certainly ones we can expect to nick a point from. Yeah. And those points might be significant because if they're against teams around us and we've taken a point from, say, I don't know, Burnley, for example, then we've stopped them getting 3. And so it effectively becomes a 2-pointer or a 4-pointer, whatever you want to call it, you know. So I don't know how we sort it out. I think we certainly need some pace. I think at home we look very dangerous and the crowd get on top of everybody. It's a narrow pitch. I don't know what the actual dimensions are. I mean, it looks smaller, doesn't it? Maybe it's not. I don't know.
It's the smallest in the league.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's ever since Arsenal moved, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because,
Really?
I think that plays into our hands because at home, certainly, I mean, we're looking at wider issues here, but at home, he'll play Bobby up and he'll play Charlie up. And 9 times out of 10, it will be a long ball into Bobby that he controls, chest down, and then brings others into play. Can you necessarily do that away from home when...
It sounds unsophisticated, but you sometimes just need a bit of pace to unsettle teams and just pull defenders out of position. It's not necessarily about getting to the byline and getting a cross in, just giving them something to think about, and we're just so pedestrian.
Anyone who can get in behind if you look at Palace last season, what they did under Pulis, I mean, they effectively played a back 6, but the 4 up front were pacey.
Yeah.
So you had Balassi, Punchin, you had
Tom Ince coming in as well.
Tom Ince would play, but also Cameron Jerome, who ran and would run in behind defence and cause problems. I saw Palace up at Man City over the Christmas period, and they lost 1-0.
Yeah, they put up a good fight there, didn't they?
Joe Hart was man of the match because Palace didn't have loads of possession, but when they got it up the pitch quickly. They used pace to get it there, and they created chances. Yeah. And I think sometimes an approach, it depends on your approach away from home. I mean, the back end at the second half of last season, although there were defeats, but they were, you mentioned, Wednesday were scrapping, Brighton were going well, Derby were going well, Bournemouth are a very good team. It's difficult to go down to Dean Court. So there are mitigating factors. Yeah. And that season, I think, I heard the other day, that 94-95 season, Coventry finished 14th that season without winning away from home in the top flight.
We talked earlier, Aidan, didn't we? Fulham stayed in the Premier League for a number of years.
One win.
With a
one win away from home.
Leeds finished mid to lower in the Premier League a year after they won the league title, they didn't win an away game all season.
It is incredible. The only concern is the pressure you're putting on these home games by not picking anything up on the road. Some will say the home form can't continue. On the other hand, surely that away form can't continue either. No. I suppose it's which changes first. I know. And that time will tell
risky,
on that.
Isn't it?
Just going back to 2014, that game against Wigan at the end of March when we won 1-0 here, I think it was Yossi Benayoun from a Clint Hill back heel.
Yeah.
That's right.
Memory serves me right.
Yeah.
That was a big win. Under the lights, which is, as we all know, always everyone enjoyed coming to Loftus Road when the lights.
And it was against a team that when you're looking at the playoffs, you're thinking this is a team
psychological
hitting form, weren't they?
Yeah, they were banging for.
Yeah.
And nobody knew at that time that we'd get them in the playoffs. But I don't know about you, I thought that was a big win that night.
Yeah.
If you said to me before that first league game that we'd played them 3 times, win 2 and draw 1, I probably wouldn't have taken that. You wouldn't have seen me rushing down to the bookies, put it that way.
Yeah. But even then, after beating a strong Wigan side, few days later, we play Blackpool at home and we draw, and then we go to Bournemouth and lose.
Yes.
And then follow that up with a defeat at Blackburn. I remember the defeat at Blackburn, and you're thinking, if we hang on for a playoff place, we could end up being the whipping boys because we are stumbling into the playoffs.
Bournemouth was one of those games, though. I think there seemed to be... Bournemouth were in with a shout of the playoffs, had a lot of momentum on their side. It was a ground that big teams don't tend to like going to. But on the day, we could still have won. I wasn't that concerned about that really, but yeah, they won a few days later at Blackburn when I was in at work that night in the studio, settling down to watch it and on our feed, and no, it was very disappointing, I have to say.
But then we followed, the Forest game was remarkable, wasn't it? A lunchtime kick-off on Sky. Probably didn't play very well early on, and then went nap in the final 10 to 15 minutes.
But that sort of game, you're looking and think Ravel Morrison could be the key for us because he was having moments of brilliance, and that game epitomised that.
And that was Bobby, something clicked with Bobby. I mean, we've looked through this and we haven't mentioned Steve Black yet.
No,
Steve Black,
waiting to
Steve Black's arrival in March time. I think Middlesbrough away on March 22nd. I think that was his first game he travelled to.
Before the game, he went out throwing bottle tops around the Middlesbrough penalty box, didn't he?
Yeah, Bobby's a more benefited from that. But yeah, Steve Black's arrival. Obviously, Steve Black, the psychologist who'd worked with Joey Barton before, worked with a number of top pros, Johnny Wilkinson, etc., etc. He came in and the whole find a way, we need to find a way to win football matches.
And you saw the change, didn't you? On the pitch within a week, there was a completely different attitude out there.
A number of players that you wouldn't believe would buy into the sports psychology of things did, and it just slowly but surely just phased.
Desperation, isn't it? It's kind of you just cling to anything, don't you?
I mean, Harry said, I wish he'd met Steve Black 30 years ago because some of the things he brought to the table in that run towards the playoffs were remarkable. Fairly straightforward. You've been around it. Fairly straightforward. But just sublime little messages here and there from when the players come off from training, just a couple of key words that will then be integrated within them for the rest of the day. They can take it away. To the match day where there was messages around the dressing room, and it seemed to almost galvanise and bring the group together.
It certainly had an impact.
You see with other sports, I think, the impact of people talk about anything gives you an extra 2 or 3% can make a difference, and you look at Ronnie O'Sullivan, for example.
Jim Smith was doing it here in the 80s, wasn't he?
Yeah.
John Sire was the guy's name. I think it's on YouTube somewhere. Very entertaining QED documentary.
But I mean, it's been tried and tested. Cyclists, individual sports and team sports. It does work.
It is tried and tested. It does work. Yeah. There are certain people who scoff at the suggestion of having a psychologist. I know with Glenn Hoddle previously with England, and it's almost laughed about, bringing in a psychologist.
But you're going to have to believe in the attitude
how's
of the players.
How's a psychologist going to tell Steven Gerrard how to score a free kick?
Well, Harry Redknapp, he's been in the game 30 years. He should know, you would have thought he'd know everything that you would need to know in that period. But the game's changed, isn't it? Yeah. Somewhat.
The game changes month by month these days, training techniques and things like that. And I think you have to accept that if there's more than one way to skin a cat in terms of your coaching methods, there's things change all the time. A psychologist might just shake things up at the right time, and it appears Steve Black did that.
And with regards to Steve Black, I think the first that he actually worked previously with Steve McLaren, and when Steve McLaren went out to FC Twente, he asked Steve Black to go with him, but he didn't because he had other job opportunities that he went with. But the first Steve McLaren knew of Steve Black's involvement with us was here at Wigan, the second leg. Steve McLaren was working for Sky because they were in the final, obviously, and I think he was disappointed to see Steve Black involved with QPR because he knew of the impact that he could and was having around the place.
That's a great night, that as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, we can almost fast forward to it a little bit because the latter end of our season.
Let's not forget, though, just before you go on to the playoffs, Barnsley away, that for me was when Yoon Suk Yoon really came to the party and showed what he's capable of.
Really good footballer.
He's got a fine individual goal, which typical finish from him, calm, considered, just stroked down with his left foot, gave the keeper absolutely no chance. I think it was our third goal in the winning
yes,
goal.
it was, yes.
But that was when QPR fans, perhaps, and other football fans in general, began to think QPR got a good left back here. Because at first
they thought he was a token player just for the relationship in the Far East, and he's developed into a good player. He did struggle on Monday, but this season he's played really well, and we weren't expecting this. It's a bit of an unknown.
Just looking back to April here, it's really jogging my memory. We really scrapped against Watford
last
At
minute.
home, didn't we? Yes,
Charlie came off the bench.
That's right. Wasn't there a penalty somewhere? Well, no, I might be thinking of Millwall actually, but Millwall I think were pretty unfortunate not to win that game.
Yeah, they were.
I don't know. Holloway kept them up. He did really well here. That's sometimes what happens when a former manager comes
I
back
think
to a club.
we had a penalty against.
Well, they were in good form though
That's right.
at that point as well, because they ended the season Millwall.
Yeah, they did. Away
or 9
well, they were the ultimate scrappers, weren't they?
Yeah,
because they were fighting for their survival.
I think that this game was the only away game they didn't win.
It went to the last day for them because of that point.
But that Watford game, Charlie came off the bench, did he? Was that his first game back?
I think he did actually. Yeah.
And then he scored a fantastic goal.
That's right. Yeah.
We broke.
That's right. He curled it into the far corner, didn't he?
Yeah. And then there was a great celebration in the corner, and that was kind of when you felt like everyone's coming together.
I didn't see that coming.
Didn't you?
Leicester away was. I watched that game on television. and we were really poor in that.
Yeah.
Okay, we were playing against a really decent side, top of the league. Pretty much nailed on for.
Well, they were almost promoted.
Yeah, they were, and I just thought they were probably there for the taking, really, and we had an opportunity there to do something. We didn't.
Me,
but the games after that were much improved.
For me, the only benefit of us having that stumble towards the end was we weren't chasing second spot into the last 2 games.
Yeah.
I wanted us, if we're not going to make automatic, then let's mess it up with 5-6 games to go so the players can get their head around the fact that we've got the playoffs to come.
Yeah.
Well, the pressure
because
was
the
off
worst thing would be
automatic,
to lose out on the final day of automatic, go into the playoffs with some heads psychologically on the beach, if you like, and thinking we shouldn't even be here, we should have wrapped it up, and going into it disappointed. We knew we'd messed up the automatic, and almost the last couple of games, particularly the Barnsley one, it was a preparation game.
Cole Donaldson, I think, made his debut in that game.
Yeah,
Harry made a number of changes.
But you mentioned earlier about how Richie Dunn, was it after the Blackburn game?
After Sheffield Wednesday.
Sheffield Wednesday, where he said that
we need to make sure.
But already that seed of like, well, hang on, psychologically preparing yourself for a top 6 finish and nothing else, rather than maybe you can chase those rainbows and right until the end. Well, actually, you've got to think about it. Well, look, there are 2 opportunities. It could well be, as long as the final goal is achieved. It doesn't matter how it's achieved.
No, and also
you've got to start having that in your head.
You mentioned that Leicester away game. You look at the 6 up. We were unbeaten in 6 after that, so you can't be accused of not pulling out the results when it really mattered.
Well, that's what we did do. We just pulled out the results when it mattered, because if you look, and I know obviously we beat Derby and Wigan, but prior to that, a draw, then the win at Barnsley, draw, win at Watford, lost to Leicester, win at Forest, lost at Blackburn, lost at Bournemouth, drew with we were all over the place results-wise. And you're looking at Wigan going into play.
But that's when
and you're thinking, I hope they play each other. I hope it ends up they play each other. At one point, it looked like we were going to play Reading on that final day, and then Reading.
I wasn't fancying Brighton after
that
away game in March.
Absolutely. But also with the way Brighton got into it, like they were on, it was bonus mode for them. They got into the last
from nowhere.
minute.
Suddenly they
it was bonus territory, and you think, they could be dangerous as well. And I thought of the 4, I genuinely thought we've got the least chance here. Yeah. Because I think you can make a stronger argument for all 3 other
But that was when
teams.
Gary made some bold selections in that Wigan game. I don't think anybody foresaw Gary O'Neill starting the game at Wigan.
Yeah.
Richard Dunn was monumental.
Yeah.
And then
I thought we were okay at Wigan, actually.
I thought the game plan was decent.
What did you make of our approach? Because it was clearly don't give them a win was our approach. If we were to nick a win, great, but do not
bring
lose.
them back to Loftus Road and then.
It was an acceptance of our away form in some ways.
It was.
Look, we can take care of things at Loftus Road. Away we struggle, so
let's not do anything silly.
Don't give them a lead. I mean, this is the thing that it's a 2-legged game, so therefore it's half time. Full time at the DW is half time in the tie.
Yeah.
So it means you go into the second half with an advantage because it was here.
Brilliant support as well.
Friday night up there. It's murder getting up the M6, isn't it? It's just an absolute nightmare on a Friday of any day. But I think that was a sensible approach with the game plan, which was to, at the very least, because the whole thing about away goals and all this sort of stuff, at the very least not get beaten, because then it's then how you approach it at home. Because the previous season, again, I'd seen Brighton celebrating against Crystal Palace when they got a 0-0 at Selhurst Park. Now they celebrated as if they were through because their home form. Palace had stumbled somewhat. They'd stumbled into the top 6. Palace went down there and did a job under Ian Holloway again. Mention that name again. Yeah. But this time around, you just thought it's going to be slightly different. I'm not sure that the crowd here would be the same as the Brighton crowd was down at the Amex against Crystal
Well, I
Palace.
remember Clint Hill was man of the match in the away leg at Wigan, and he did a Sky interview on the pitch afterwards. And I remember him clearly saying, "It's half time. We've won nothing yet. but we're confident because we're at home.
Yeah.
And then he turned round and he gave a little bit of a fist pump to the supporters who were singing his name. But there was a confidence, but it wasn't an overconfidence. They knew that it was half a job done.
It was just say half.
It's like you said earlier, Wigan. You look at the players they kept last year. The spine of the team that got relegated was still there.
The spine of the team that won the FA Cup.
Yeah, was still there.
Yeah.
So were you confident going into the second leg at Loftus Road?
You're never confident.
You're a QPR fan.
No, not really. But not because I thought we were awful or anything. I watched the game at Wigan. I had an operation in hospital on the Friday, so that really cheered me up. That draw. But then on Monday, I was fit enough. I was past fit by the doctor to go to the game on Monday. And no, I wasn't. I just didn't really know which way it was going to go. I was just looking forward to an enjoyable evening, and that's exactly what it was. And obviously, we felt a bit.
Did you enjoy it?
I was about to ask you that. As a fan, how can you enjoy it? People, when you go to a game, people
I think it's
say
horrific.
enjoy the match.
Everything about
you
the
don't
playoffs,
enjoy a match if you're a fan.
Absolutely horrific. It was a great experience. I would never want to go through the playoffs again.
I agree with you.
I think if you don't enjoy the football when you come to see it, then you probably need to find something different to do with
you
your life.
You don't enjoy watching. You can enjoy watching. No, but you can enjoy watching another team play.
We do not necessarily share the news of Aidan McGee from Sky Sports News. Please do continue to come to Loftus Road.
You can't sit down and relax because you're tense, you're het up, and if it's in your blood.
Did you think at 1-0? Did you think that's us? We're out.
Yeah, I must admit I did.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. But
then when it went 1-0, for me there was only one side that was going to win.
Once we'd equalised, I was confident. But when Perch scored there after 4 or 5 minutes,
I thought McLean was excellent that night.
And he goes through, doesn't he? Hits the post.
That's right.
3 yards.
Yeah. That was important.
But then your main man comes to the party again with 2 priceless goals.
Well, you talk about that, but you could argue the main man that night wasn't the fellow who got the 2 goals because Bobby Zamora turned that game.
Yeah. Bobby Zamora again. I was saying that. It was his touch.
And what a remarkable year he's had. Well, not just a year, but his QPR career.
Yeah,
I know.
I mean, he was the boo boy, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I think it was one of your colleagues, new colleagues at Sky, Lewis Jones, famously dubbed him Bobby No Mora because he didn't want to see him again. But then all of a sudden, it's a name on everyone's lips. And
it's not class,
fickle fans.
Parallels with Paul Furlong, to be fair.
Yes. Everyone says that.
From the last promotion-winning side, from the side that got up from League One. But I remember Furs getting booed onto the pitch once here, which was, excuse me, absolutely disgraceful. His links, obviously, with a certain other club down the King's Road, I don't think helped.
At QPR,
Yeah, but his links with the lot down the King's Road didn't help. But he turned it round. He turned, him and Gallant, and the same, I suppose, with Bobby Zamora in a different set of circumstances, but similar sort of thing.
Still a pressure situation, though.
Some players need to be loved as well, don't they?
Yeah, I think
and you can sense
even
now,
experienced players.
Whenever Bobby takes to the field, and the song's become legendary, hasn't it?
Yeah,
especially here. He just feels 10 feet tall whenever he's out there.
Yeah, you can see he goes onto the pitch.
But you're right. That night he
completely turned the game,
which leads us nicely on to.
Well, it does. I mean, but you talk about the celebrations or muted celebrations after the first leg.
Yeah.
After the second leg, we did a tunnel camera and we thought we'll get the celebrations in the dressing room. Camera went in the dressing room and they were just shaking each other. It was so measured, even away from the spotlight of on the pitch.
I think they'd had their fingers burned throughout the season.
Shaking hands, sitting, discussing, but there was no high five.
It was another half time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Completely. But even when they went out for the lap of honour, again, it was Clint Hill who was turning to the players before they all came out. And obviously the fans are celebrating, and you get that because it was an unbelievable night, pouring with rain, amazing. The
chance to go back to Wembley
just before the extra time. It was incredible.
It was buzzing out in the streets as well.
It was amazing.
Fantastic.
But the players came out of that, and just before they did, Clint turned to all the players behind him and said, "We haven't won anything. We've still got a game. Bear that in mind." And then he led them out, and it was so measured, and you almost can't put a value on that experience at that time.
I love that picture of Charlie and Joey both pointing up to Steve in the skybox and said, "We're coming for you." Because those two more than any had a great relationship.
And
with
the
Steve
fans
McLaren.
were singing that too, Steve.
Steve McLaren, we're coming for you. Yeah.
Isn't it a difficult one though in the playoffs because traditionally your last home game of the season you will always do a lap to say thanks to the fans, and it's if you're at home in the first leg of the playoffs, you've got to do that when the tie isn't sorted. I suppose if you do it, and then if you're
because if you hadn't come out, you'd be accused of being killjoy, wouldn't you?
Yes.
But they did something at Wigan, but did they do anything at Wigan? I'm trying to think. If Wigan did
their
come
players
out.
came back out.
They did come back out,
because
but
albeit I was down the tunnel that day. Albeit they weren't really keen to go out. No. But I think the chairman in the end said,
they had nothing really to celebrate in the season.
They came out in dribs and drabs.
The season, the biggest games their season was still to come.
Yeah. So you're doing it, but you don't want to overdo it because it's not a lap of honour; it's a lap of thanks. So it's how you play that, and I think it was done in the appropriate way. But psychologically, you've got to get that right.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to think you've won anything. Because the playoffs is almost like a 3-game season. That's it.
It's a mini
season. You get there, you've almost got to go, bang, it's stopped now.
One of the worst things about it is the 12-day wait between Wigan and that final, because you almost can't concentrate on it.
I remember a conversation, me, you, Joey and Clint had a conversation at the training ground, and we almost put together a PR plan that was linked towards the players between now and the final. And Joey said to us, if you keep us out the papers for the next 7 to 8 days, the final 4 days, we'll take care of it. You'll put us up for interviews. We'll say the right things. We'll get the core messages across. And we did that. I mean,
his point was, he said, we don't want to give Derby anything to use against us. He said, if I was in the Derby dressing room, I'd be looking for one of the QPR players to slip up, say something arrogant, or that can be represented as arrogant, and then it gives them something more to work with.
We did lots of subliminal things in that period, though, didn't we? But the players were given, I think, 3 or 4 days off after the game against Wigan. When they came back on I think it was on the Monday ahead of the Saturday game, or it might have been the Saturday ahead of the following Saturday. There were new images around the training ground of the semi-final victories. Just so when they came back in, they knew, you don't have to tell the players the magnitude of the game. I'm sure they were well aware, but just again, it was Steve Black, just small messages to give the place a different feel and make them feel 10 feet tall when they walked in the building.
It's a different approach. It's how you approach it, because, again, going back the year before, covering Brentford, and they got to the playoff final against Yeovil, and obviously Uwe Rosler, who suffered with Brentford, then suffered with Wigan. Brentford approached it in a certain way. Yeovil approached it as if it was a cup final. They made a song. They were photographed in, making gloves in a glove-making factory, obviously, in that part of Somerset. They did everything, special photo shoots, and people were going. And the suggestion was, are they going about this the wrong way? Are they bigging it up? Is it their big day out, and is the balloon going to pop? No, because they came out, bang, straight into the game, and bang, bang, two up, and it was Brentford who sort of almost, it could have gone the other way. Yeah, but I think Gary Johnson's approach was, we're little old Yeovil, we don't stand a chance. 10 years ago we were non-league. Just over 10 years, and now it's his approach is and actually I think he used it to relax the players. He took their mind off the game by getting them involved in silliness, but different approaches, I think.
Our approach, our key approach, I think, was this whole. It's the we are together thing. Yeah. Again, it came from the supporters, it came from the fans, it came from the club. Everybody in it together. And I think the key in that first week after the victory was, right, let's get everybody together. We're all reading from the same page. 40,000 tickets. We took extra tickets in the end because the demand was so big. And then I think the flags.
Well, didn't it?
I always remember the typical Londoners being able to do what they want at Wembley. Well, no, we used our initiative. Derby had the option of doing flags. They opted, I think, for scarves in the end.
Yeah. But
the flags, and the players were there on the Friday night before the game on the Saturday, walking around, and there's hundreds of QPR volunteers laying out 40,000 flags. And I think that had a real impact.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like being
well, you were there working, weren't you?
It was like being there at a match in South America in the 70s or something like that. It was just an atmosphere I hadn't really seen before. But I opted to work. I wasn't down to work that day, but I wanted to work it just because I thought it would be a different experience as a fan and as a professional, really.
So what did you do on the day of the game in a working capacity?
I was live on Wembley Way from 10 a.m. So I was working for Sky Sports News and obviously Sky News, because it's a big game. They want to take a bit of it as well. So you're doing lives, you're interviewing punters, you're doing as lives as well. And then all the way up to, and then I think about 12 o'clock we moved inside the stadium.
Was that able to keep your mind off the game as a QPR fan?
It was at that stage, because there was only a few fans out at 10 o'clock. It's just a few fans outside, and it was quite good natured actually, the atmosphere building up to it. When you get inside, I certainly noticed a difference between probably about 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Players come out and start warming up. There was the guys who do the video technology on the goal line. We filmed them doing it, and they didn't like that very much, but they were just testing it out, just dropping a ball on it and everything. And you get a real sense for the atmosphere, probably stuff you would see on a normal home game. But obviously you don't get fans in sort of 3 hours before the match, do you? And I think I interviewed Jermaine Genus.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
Who else did we do? Oh, we did someone from the Football League. We did the groundsman as well. And I use the line, it's turf at the top. And so, you have to, when you're doing so many lives, you have to think of something original every now and again. And then I think from about, I took my seat, I had a quick photo with Jude the cat, just going around the pitch. I was a little bit unprofessional, but I made my way all the way round to where the press box was. I went in there and I was able to relax for a while.
Did you have to work during the 90 minutes?
No, we didn't. I mean, they were done then until post-match. And that's what I mean. It was a different experience. It was an experience. It saved all faffing around about tickets. It didn't cost me a fortune as well, because some people were paying 95 quid.
Yeah.
You were getting paid for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't down to work it. It was a bonus game for me. I just
paid handsomely, judging by that jumper.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, no, I haven't paid for it. You know, it's still got the label on it. Yeah, exactly. The lady in the club shop did me a good favour.
You too can own a jumper like this. Check out the QPR Superstore.
But the hardest thing, the payoff in the final was, having had the experience I'd had, the payoff was just like not being able to celebrate when the goal went in. I mean, you're risking. You're compromising yourself as a professional.
That's the important thing is you in that working capacity you have to be completely impartial, don't you?
Yeah, stifle it, don't you? You have to stifle that excitement.
I just got my phone out.
I just got
my phone out and just started recording it, and I couldn't say a word, and I was just thinking, I'm thinking all sorts of things, and imploding inside, wishing I could just celebrate. And everyone around me knows I'm a QPR fan as well, so they're kind of looking at me for a reaction, and I was not able to do anything because I think it's disrespectful to the other team as well. And you've got Derby fans right near us.
We had this at Man City. Do you remember Man City a couple of seasons ago?
Hugely disrespectful. I mean, Phil, let's just listen.
By Hoilett into the penalty area. In towards Austin.
That is completely impartial.
If Derby had scored, it would have been exactly the same. Of course.
To be fair, though, you're representing a London station.
Yes,
so you have to.
It's one of our teams. You've got to get excited.
And you were professional in that.
But I mean, it was hugely exciting. It was a hugely exciting moment. I mean, the thing is,
for a neutral, it's a hugely exciting moment. Yeah. For a QPR fan, obviously, even more so.
Yeah, but
Derby fan probably wouldn't call it exciting.
No.
But how did you, because of the nature of the goal, we were waiting to lose, effectively, many would argue. We scored that goal. How did you continue to operate in a working capacity like you did?
What during the commentary?
You said he won it. I wasn't thinking that. I was expecting a Derby equaliser actually, but
but for the remaining minutes, how did you console yourself?
Well, you just hope that Derby didn't get an equaliser, because then you sound like a right book.
Just ignore it.
Don't score. I don't know, because you talk about for you sitting there with the Wigan game. It's a nightmare. You're biting your fingernails. Aidan has to be professional. The one thing about doing live commentary is because you're not playing the game, but you're involved. You're very much involved. You're talking about what's going on. So therefore, you're not. It's a different experience. You can get nervous or you can get excited, but ultimately, you just if something happens, then you move on to the next thing. You're not sitting there thinking about it. Bang! You got something else. Something else is happening out on the pitch. I don't know. I mean, Bradley Allen was with me as well. He was up and down, bouncing up and down and punching the air at that point. Because, as you said, I think the circumstance in which the goal was scored was so dramatic. Yeah. Down to 10 men. Charlie, I think, blowing out of parts of his body he couldn't imagine he could have breathed out of. He was shattered. Lots of players had put in a massive shift.
Hoilett basically chased a lost cause.
He did.
And it late in the game, it forced a couple of mistakes.
There'd been an incident, a breakaway about a minute beforehand, where I got a sense Derby switched off defensively here.
Joey Barton's shot.
Yeah, they're pushing Derby. They're looking for the win, and I think that was poor. Personally, I thought it was poor game management from Derby, because if they'd looked at it, and maybe this is the naivety of slightly younger players. Yeah. If they just said, let's take no extra time. These boys are a chance will come in 30 minutes.
But it was a bit of class on the finish as well. It was real class. Well, just down the chest and just side-footed.
He's scored 2 goals now. I interviewed him afterwards. 160 million pounds.
I interviewed him after the game, and he said, you always taught as a kid, try and aim for the side netting if you can. The inside of the side netting.
Just opened up. He opened up, and it was. I mean, it was a super finish.
Just going back to the game, what was going through everyone's mind when Gary O'Neill got sent off?
that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you thought
that was it, finished. We've got no chance.
I would agree.
At all.
I would agree. I thought as soon as that happened, and the frustrating thing was we'd had our 2 best chances in the 5 minutes prior to that, both Charlie Austin, particularly the first one, second one he blazed over. But I thought we're getting into the game here. Derby have had dominated large spells, and now we're starting to come strong. And I understood why he did it.
Yeah, when you look back, had he not done it,
but even at the time,
sitting here now.
Even at the time, I understood why he did it. I think if Derby had gone 1-0 up, some people argue I'd have taken 1-0 with 11 v 11 for half an hour.
I wouldn't.
I actually think,
not in the form they're in.
It proved to be the case, but exactly with them 1 up on that pitch, I think it would have been very difficult.
Because they could have sat, and they did have some pace, they did have some youth, and obviously they could have sat and played on the break, and the R's would have been forced, to risk more and more. I understand why. You do it because you think he might give me a yellow, and we heard from Gary afterwards, and he said I took the chance, and I knew I was going to,
I thought
bring
he was gone.
down.
And when the mates went over to the linesman, I thought he's got a chance here that he should never have. He might get away with this.
What about Harry? And we didn't really give him praise for the changes he made here in the semi-final against Wigan. Again, ballsy changes. Many people have sacrificed Clint Hill at that stage?
And
Probably
taken
not.
his time to make that decision. I know a lot of people were, because Harry came out, he was discussing with Kevin Bond and Joe Jordan, and it went on for a good 5 or 6 minutes.
Because he already lost Nico after 20, 25 minutes.
And people you could see people telling him, change it. You've got to make the change. But again, perhaps down to his experience, it was a hugely important decision, and he was going to make sure he took the necessary time before making it right.
With the 10 men thing as well, I think 15 years ago, but the cliche still endures, it's hard to play against 10 men. It is to a degree, but I think it's got easier with the way the game is so pace intensive now. If you've got an extra man, it's a huge advantage. And every time I see a play, it's very rare now we see certainly in the top 2 divisions, teams with 10 men going on to win a game, and that's why I was so shocked.
And the difficulty for us was we had nothing to hang on to. It wasn't a league game where you think down 10 men, hang on for a point.
Yeah.
We had nothing to hang on to, so we're defending. And personally, I was thinking, this is just inevitable.
Yeah, a battering.
Because even if we reach extra time, we're not going to get through another half an hour.
How good was Rob Green now in that fight?
Well, this is the thing. I can't remember any world-class saves he made, but what he did was he just took the pressure off the team by just catching everything that came into the box. It's one of the hardest skills in goalkeeping. And most of them are decent shot stoppers. A goalkeeper distinguishes themselves by their concentration and how they take crosses, because he came out and caught everything. And anything that was too far out of his reach, Richard Dunn was outstanding. He just swept up everything on the edge of the box. And those 2 players for me were the outstanding players on the day, really.
What about the celebrations then?
The celebration.
We lost it, didn't we?
Yeah, I was like a statue. So.
So what did you have to do at the final whistle?
It's a bit different to a normal game because you're waiting for lots of things to happen. You have to wait for the trophy presentation first of all, and I'm standing underneath the stairwell where the players walk up and just sort of taking it all in. Really, you'd had the moment where the goal had gone in, you had the moment of the final whistle, watching the players go up and celebrate. And I was there in '86. Were you there in '86, Phil?
No.
I was there in '86, and that was one of the worst days of my life.
When was
really.
that? I can't. That year's been blotted out.
Having beaten Chelsea in the quarters, Liverpool, who went on to win the double in the semis, and then losing to Oxford, who in hindsight had quite a good team actually. It was a terrible day, wasn't it?
An awful day.
And so it was a little bit of 28 years on. Something it was almost a sense of righting a wrong, and the prize was so much bigger this time as well. So you're waiting for that, and then obviously players start drifting into the mix zone downstairs. It's a huge stadium, as we know. So you're going down 3 or 4 flights of stairs, and you're getting into the mix zone. And just waiting, and you start seeing the manager and the players start sort of drifting out. The Derby players were very, very good, I have to say. They fronted up. I think they
were excellent.
Touch of class as well, standing on the pitch.
Comes from the manager, doesn't it?
The QPR players going up. That is, it must be an awful position for them to be in, but to show that level of class was outstanding.
We filmed Bobby with the trophy. And I asked him about his contract situation. Does he hope to stay on a bit longer? And obviously he said...
Always looking for a line.
He did, exactly. And Harry as well was also very good. By the time he'd come off the phone to Sandra, he managed to get a word with us. And as I say, the Derby players were good. We got a couple of other QPR players that day. I can't remember who they were.
I think you got Gary O'Neill.
Oh, we did get Gary O'Neill, yeah. And that's when he said, I had to take one for the team, basically, for want of a better phrase. And that's exactly what he did. And fortunately, it paid off.
We lost it, didn't we?
Well,
it was funny, wasn't it? Because prior to the game, there was a huge press presence at the game, but not the presence that you get for maybe a big European Cup final or an FA Cup final. So we were due to sit on the Derby side of the stadium. And
because there's two press boxes, one in the Derby side and one on the QPR.
So we asked to be moved, and they said, "Well, yeah, that's fine. There's space, but you're going to be sitting with the guys from the army who we've invited along. They're probably going to be quite beard up because it was a big day out for them." We sat with them. They were good as gold.
I was next to a Derby fan.
Well, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And it was a good job because to say we lost the plot when we scored would be it was great for me.
You talk about the importance of professionalism. It went straight out the window. We're an absolute disgrace.
My brother-in-law was like six stairwells down. It was amazing to be able to share it with them. And, it was just, and then I said to Moz, we need to get pitch side because we need to get the manager straight away. And Moz, no, they're going to score. They're going to score. Typical Mr. Nervous Neris over here, just gets petrified. And I said, this is a big stadium. Like you said, you've got to get down 4 flights of stairs.
We rowed all the way down.
Yeah,
flights of stairs.
They're going to score.
We should be going down. Yeah. This is a kiss of death.
And then we eventually made it. And then Gary O'Neill was down there, wasn't he? And he was just running out as a final whistle. It was incredible.
Amazing. And for you, Phil, as a moment in time, where does that stand in terms of covering QPR?
In terms of covering QPR, it's massively dramatic. I think there's been times, there've been low times, been really low times. The week, the Vauxhall Motors and the Cardiff week. But that ended with
the week Ian joined the club.
Yeah, that was another bad moment.
But I think that the actual moment of the final whistle was one thing. But by that point, it was just we were still marvelling
buzzing
in the goal. I mean, it's still buzzing, and it's just you think about people who you get on with and who work for the club. You think about other fans. You think about people who put so much heart and soul into it. We're lucky in this business that we get paid to go and watch. I've watched and reported on and commentated on some amazing football matches and other sporting events. So, we're lucky. Some people, their life and soul is it, week in, week out, spending lots and lots of money following their football club. And those are the people that you start actually having thoughts about, think, well, they really deserve it. And for them, as you say, Aidan, 86 or Cardiff 10 years previous.
I remember looking up and seeing Tonya McDonald, Alan McDonald's wife, and it was incredible to see her and her son looking so emotional. We'd invited them to the game as the club's guests, and we'd made up some flags in advance. Probably shouldn't, but we were tempting fate that we'd win, and they had Rest in Peace Macca and his number on. And I just remember looking up at her, and she had a tear in her eye, and you just thought, people like her who have lost a loved one, who gave everything for this club.
Absolutely.
Mr. QPR, as he was known. It was great. I mean, there was so many legends there that day that the club had invited and were hosted in the Bobby Moore Suite.
Well, just great. Who was the last?
Exactly.
It was just team.
Tony always says his greatest moment in his time as chairman was when he was stood on the halfway line and he was just looking. 40,000 fans. And it was incredible. And everyone was smiling. Sun came out, didn't it?
Yes.
It just felt like the perfect party.
Yeah. And you talk about you having things done in advance if we win. And that could come across as, well, that's presumptuous, arrogant. But every club has to do it. Because
it's like an either or, isn't it?
Like
it's one or the other.
The Arsenal bus there last season, there was a picture of it because it was obviously getting mocked up. Well, you can't get it mocked up after the game. You do have to prepare for that possibility.
Well, we wanted we knew if we were going to win the game, we wanted to do something the following day. But you can't put out, because of your Arsenals, for example, you can't put that out in advance.
No, you can't.
We were meant to put that out bang on the final whistle. We completely forgot. It was only about 9 o'clock that we sent a text out to all our subscribers saying you need to be at Loftus Road in about 10 hours.
It was still over 10,000 people in the stadium. It was unbelievable.
I didn't have anything planned that night, celebration. I didn't fancy our chances at all. Yeah. And then, we just at the end of the game, after everything was done, probably an hour and a half after kick-off, there's a guy called Mike Bridge who works at Sky, was with us, and he said, why don't you come to Faces? You can stay at Mum and Dad's. And so that's where we went Faces over in Essex. Yeah, it was brilliant.
But we came back here, didn't it? It was a great party for the staff and the players.
And all the players all came back.
Some fans as well that were friends of families. It was just,
I think, a lovely atmosphere.
Yeah, Joey gave a really nice speech. Phil Beard did. Tony Fernandez, Harry got on the mic as well.
Yeah.
I think that's what That's what QPR is all about,
Again,
isn't it?
The old cliche family club.
It
and
is.
That day it really showed it.
Yeah, and it almost completed the full circle of a couple of years ago when it's the most, certainly in the time I've been at the club, probably the most divided the fans and the players almost of the club
the turbulent time
compared to where they became and where we are now. It's a complete U-turn. Having progressed into the Premier League, it's been it started as a bit of a baptism of fire, although that opening day we lost to Hull, but having lost previously 4-0 and 5-0 on the opening day.
We came out, a little happier.
The players got applauded off the pitch despite losing because we looked like we belonged in the Premier League.
Absolutely, and I think there was one we switched off from a set piece. I think James Chester scored the goal, didn't he? But yeah, after that, I mean, I did think it was an opportunity missed. I did think that at the end of the season, I mean, Chris Coleman said to me 10 years ago when he was Fulham manager, he said every manager looks at the start of the season at the fixture list and thinks, right, where am I going to get 10 wins from? Yeah. In the hope that you'll probably on average draw 5 or 6, and there's your 36 points. And you would look at Hull as a team who were promoted, the year before us, don't particularly travel that well, albeit they got to an FA Cup final and they play here on the opening day and they go away and nick a win. Yeah. And then you're looking at our fixtures and you're thinking, well, we've got some tough away games coming up. I think the home games in the first half of the season have been more winnable than we're going to experience in the second half. Yeah. But yeah, it was a real...
But ditto the away games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, but having said that, the whole game, the performance was decent.
Charlie Austin that day missed a penalty, didn't he? And everybody was looking at Charlie Austin, scored goals throughout, non-league and then throughout the...
And has he finally
throughout the football
reached
league.
A point where he can't do it anymore?
Can't do it. He's missed a penalty. I know he didn't play at Tottenham, did he? He had an injury at Tottenham.
That's right.
We're not going to talk about Burton because we don't want to talk about Burton. But then the final game in August, Charlie showed, Ian Dowie coined the phrase, and he bounced back ability, and Charlie did with a really well taken goal, and that just got him up and running.
Yeah. Has he surprised you, Phil, Charlie Austin? 18-14.
Yes, it's very impressive. I mean, he is, the role he plays is to be up there in order to score goals. But I think we've seen it. We've seen players now who can make a transition. I mean, we talk about Burnley yet again, but I mean, there's goals coming from Danny Ings. Charlie's done it.
I just don't think pace is everything up front.
No, it's not. It's about. I mean, Harry Kane's not the quickest. He's what Harry's got and Charlie's got. They've got hearts.
Harry Kane's not as good a footballer as
hearts of lions as well. They work hard. They get in there. And what Charlie's done is he's honed his art of being a finisher.
Yeah. I know somebody scouted him very young, and they said I was chatting to him about 2 months ago, and he said that's a guy who'll score you a goal anywhere. So I think we've lost a lot of players down the years who've got into the Premier League and not really done it because the supply line hasn't been there, and sometimes the flair player gets sacrificed when a team goes up into the top division and they have to close up part of the bus, as the cliche goes. But yeah, Charlie Austin this season, I think
it's interesting.
He's a finisher, isn't he?
Yeah. It's interesting with Charlie because we had him on the show a couple of weeks ago, and when he went to sign up Paul, he didn't actually want to sign for Paul because he said he didn't know anybody and he was didn't want to go there. And it was his father who actually said to him, "Sign. You don't know where it's going to lead to."
No,
and look at it now.
It was remarkable.
Top English goal scorer in the Premier League.
An interview he did a couple of weeks ago, and he said he contemplated retiring from the game after he failed his medical at Hull.
Yeah, this is it.
And now look at him. Yeah, 24 months on.
Yeah.
England's
it shows as well that medicals are just too stringent in football, aren't they? I mean, how many players have been...
Their loss was certainly our gain.
Absolutely. I mean, you think John Hartson John Hartson came out to haunt Rangers so many times over the next 5 years after they decided the medical wasn't quite right. Demba Ba, Stoke decided that he wasn't worth taking a punt on. I think he scored about 50-odd Premier League goals since then.
You look at 16 in Turkey this season.
You look at Loic Remy. Yeah, Liverpool. I know he hasn't played much at Chelsea, but Liverpool crying out for someone like Loic Remy.
Well, you take Remy ahead of Balotelli right now, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
any day.
Manchester United. That was all a bit of a fanfare, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the disappointing thing. I mean, we actually at the end of August, I think the 3 points had got us up to about 10th, 11th in the league.
12th, according to your
12th. There we go. Excellent.
Your printout. Well done.
We've all got a copy. So they got us up to 12th in the league, and we were actually buzzing off the back of the opening month because in the previous season we didn't get out of the bottom 3 all season. Yeah. From the opening day we lost 5-0, and we stayed in the bottom 3 for the entire season and then got relegated. It was an awful season.
Awful,
yeah.
So to see ourselves 12th in the table after the opening month, having played Spurs away and you got that one out of the way, you're sort of encouraged, but then we just sort of had that run, didn't we? Man U, really disappointing.
It was. I mean, the thing about United was that I covered that game back at base, and I just felt United somehow were there for the taking. The squad looked really
unbalanced.
They signed all these players. I just thought there's no talk about us going into it. I mean, QPR seems to be, our perception in the media has changed in the last 10, 15 years. Yeah. I don't think we're as popular outside the club as we used to be. We're we
got 28 seconds of talk time in the preview to that game.
Is that right?
On the live
It was all
Sky.
about United because of it was all about United because of
Falcao, Di Maria.
But
all the big signings.
It was at the game. It was almost like it was a bit of a carnival. It was like their first game of the season, and I remember saying beforehand, we're going to do really well to get something here because it's just written for them to have an unbelievable game because Old Trafford isn't atmosphere-wise. Maybe it's because it's little QPR and the United fans just expect to win, but normally atmosphere-wise, Old Trafford isn't the greatest.
No, it's not.
And the atmosphere there was really, really good. And it was just you were just waiting for them to click into gear. And tragically, we were the victims.
But they thought that their season had kick-started playing against us.
Well, that was the start of their season, wasn't it, as well? Because I suppose in a different circumstance, I mean, people, getting promoted through the playoffs is always difficult. Recruitment time, when you come back to pre-season training, fitness levels, trying to get your squad together. But Manchester United likewise. I mean, Van Gaal had come in, but only at the end of the World Cup. I mean, obviously he'd been doing his work, but he can only start having an influence once he's come in, when he's physically there. Players are arriving. I mean, I know the transfer, it's a contentious issue. The transfer deadline is when it is, but it can be quite disruptive because if you don't get your business done and suddenly you're doing a lot of business, a lot of clubs actually aren't, or squads aren't prepared until after that first international break, and then suddenly you've got a group of players.
And everybody says, do your business early, but
it's not that easy. It's
not that easy now.
No. Because
you talk about the medicals.
Clubs will know that they can get more towards the end of the transfer when people are desperate.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see some silly deals done in the late on in windows. Every window, someone you think, I mean, look at Arsenal in the last few years. They've always signed players late. They've tried to reverse that in recent windows, but they've seen the problems it causes. But I think a lot of it was out of their hands. If you look back at the individual deals.
Yeah.
But I always remember Crystal Palace going up in 2004. Do you remember that? And they came up via the playoffs.
Yep.
They signed something like 13 players, but it just looked to me they can't possibly have scouted these players properly. It's almost like they were throwing mud at the wall in the hope that some of it would stick. So there are all sorts of perils in windows.
I think it was the same last time, 2 years ago.
Yeah, with Palace.
With Palace as well.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, the promotion a couple of years ago, obviously there was the change of ownership, which
and it was a bit of
a different
buying. It was just see a name and buy him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was obvious for Neil Warnock's team at that period that there needed to be players added to the squad.
Yeah.
The ownership at the time when during the summer was in the process of changing, wasn't it? And Neil couldn't do the business he wanted to do. Suddenly Tony comes in. There is some money, but by that point you've got to look at, I need positions, I need players for these positions. Who can I bring in? Who's available? Who can, and you're sort of, maybe your planning is slightly different, your scouting is different. I don't know. Those sort of things have a different influence. But it's easier, and it's easier said than done. Get your business done early, get the players in that you want. Fine, but it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. We want to go through our categories to get our decisions on those. So just summing up the opening couple of months. Well, I suppose we're almost at the halfway point now.
Almost, yeah.
Well, everybody looked at October, November fixtures, didn't they? You saw Liverpool, who I know are struggling, but you had Liverpool, Man City back to back at home. Sorry, not back to back, but you had a big game against Villa, and obviously the trip to Chelsea. But there were some really good performances. I mean, at Stamford Bridge.
That was it. After the West Ham game and we lost, it was disappointing.
In the break came
and then
at the right time.
Yeah, it did. You thought, we've got Liverpool, Chelsea and Man City in 3 of our next 4 games.
And those are the 3 that
and you're thinking, crikey, if we're not careful, we could be cut adrift by the time we get to December. But that galvanises and suddenly we're unlucky not to beat Liverpool, never mind get a point.
Liverpool was a brilliant day. I just felt that was the day that I knew, okay, we lost. We were extremely unlucky, but that was a day I thought, as a supporter, I watched.
Naive as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, indeed.
Pushing on for the win, and then but the players had the wind in their sails. They just equalised. They desperately needed a result. You could almost
criticise
understand
them for going for it.
When Fer had that free kick, we just equalised. It's the 93rd minute. The crowd is buzzing, and if he'd have played it to go into the corner,
there'd have been all the crowd would
everyone
have been
would
on
say,
his
well,
back.
There's an opportunity, but we had them. They were vulnerable, so it was a mistake with hindsight. But you can almost understand it. It was just
the momentum, wasn't it, of the game, just to go and just get that last second.
But it did. You're right, Aidan. It gave you sort of a belief that there's
the
a
message.
fight in there.
I walked away thinking the message has got through to the players. You know, all the criticism they take in the 2 weeks between West Ham on October the 15th and Liverpool on October the 19th had got through to the players. Sometimes you think players don't care. I didn't see that day. I thought they were extremely unlucky. A couple of changes. Ewan came in, didn't he?
Yep.
Obviously, Vargas came on off the bench, made a big impact. And I walked away thinking, you know, obviously we're playing a team that finished second last season. They've still got most of their players, and we're playing a team that enjoyed an incredible amount of luck on the day. It can't be. We play like that most of the other games, the rest of the season, especially at home. We'll get some results.
Yeah, and then an impressive win against Aston Villa. Then we're going to Stamford Bridge, and I think some people were fearing the worst as Chelsea on a fine run of form at the time.
In that game. Very unlucky. Very disputed penalty. And it could have been.
Yeah, I saw it again this morning. I'm still not.
I'm not convinced at all.
Penalty, but you know,
striker's challenge, isn't it?
It is, would it have been given here? Probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, it was a good performance, and then City here. That's one of the best games you're going to see for a long while. I mean, you know, Aguero.
We have some good games against City.
Showing what a great player he is.
It was interesting because we almost decided just to go toe-to-toe with Man City, which you think, oh my God.
Which we did against them.
We can go toe-to-toe with anybody here.
Yeah, I agree.
I
agree.
Because it's not used to dimensions.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to take that confidence away, though, from home now.
That sums up exactly where we're at. Our home form, we've got 14 points. Our away form, we've got 0 points.
Yeah, if we could have picked up just those few points on the road.
Our away form is rock bottom. We've just got to try and take the home form on the team coach.
Important wins. The wins against Villa, Burnley, Leicester, they're important.
Burnley, Leicester, Villa, yeah.
You know, they're important results because they are the teams. Now, go away from home and pick up points at those grounds. Yeah. It's 4 points picked up from those teams that are going to be down there.
We took 1 point in from 12 last season from Leicester and Burnley.
Yeah.
And now we've got 6 out of 6. So that's an improvement, and you do have to beat the teams around you. It's as simple as that.
I mean, that's what's going to be the difference. I mean, you know, so a lot of teams are looking at saying, you know, finish 4th, bottom or above. That's great. First season, you know, you've got to build. And to do that, you've got to win almost as a mini league of 8, maybe 8 teams at the, and the bottom 8 of the Premier League.
I think there are even teams higher up than that, looking nervously when suddenly the team gets a bit of form together.
Yeah, or when they start dropping. You know, when they have a bad run. You know, you look at the likes of Swansea, who I saw the other day. You know, that they're a great footballing team, but they've had a wobble. They could drop into it, but if you've got to finish in the middle bit of that League of 8, maybe, and to do that, you've got to pick up results against those because it prevents those teams getting those points themselves, doesn't it? So those are the big wins.
Okay, so that brings to the end our 2014 year review. It's certainly been an eventful one for QPR. Our thanks to Brian Melzack, Ian Taylor, Sky Sports News' Aidan McGee, and BBC London's Phil Parry. Fingers crossed 2015 is just as successful.